Hey, everybody. Well, we are almost done. You have made it so far. Let's talk a little bit more about the coca plant in general. So, the leaves are sometimes roasted to make them a bit more flavorful. And if you're in South America, you can actually buy packets of the tea and the leaves in the marketplace, but you can't bring them back with you to the United States. That's technically considered contraband and they are illegal. One of the other things that we find is that it is increasingly difficult for people in South America to actually grow coca in their backyards. And that's partially because the U.S. is trying to get rid of them because of that importation of cocaine. The coca in the leaves actually produces an effect that is, like I said, similar to that of a cup of coffee. So it's like a weak cup of tea or coffee. And it's really only in its more concentrated form that cocaine actually has a pretty pronounced effect. It can be extracted from the leaves by adding a solvent that dissolves the leaves. And when it's dried, you get the powder that we know as cocaine. Generally, the most common method is through snorting, and that's what makes it highly addictive because it's fast acting. So, cocaine in the 19th century in particular has been used as an additive in many products for its stimulant properties. So what you're looking at here in the 1800s is an advertisement for something called Van Mariani, basically cheap red wine with cocaine. It was advertised and sold as a wine with stimulant properties. This was pretty popular in Europe and the United States because you could basically drink and get alert at the same time. So what you might think of sort of like a Red Bull cocktail today where you're getting that stimulant and you're getting the alcohol as well. One of the other things we can't talk about cocaine without talking about Coca-Cola. So yes, it is true. Part of the reason that Coca-Cola has the name it does is because it was made with cocaine and the extract of another plant known as the cola bush, which contains caffeine. So in the early 1900s, it actually had a double punch of stimulation from both the caffeine in the cola and the cocaine. But research at that point found that cocaine had detrimental properties. Sometimes if you take it, you are kind of running the risk for things like strokes, heart attacks, and so on from taking it. And so those are pretty detrimental properties. The cocaine was removed from Coca-Cola in 1903, but they still put cola in it, even though today the caffeine that is in Coca-Cola is more synthetic rather than being from the cola bush. By the 1970s, cocaine was largely popular because of in the 1970s during the disco culture. It was expensive to buy in its powdered form. It was seen as a rich person's drug and an alternative to heroin, which was very known to be dangerous at the time because many people died of heroin overdoses in the 1960s. So one of the other things that's kind of interesting about cocaine, it probably sounds a little similar in name to things like Novocaine and lidocaine. And that's because they are very, very similar in structure and all can be used as a local anesthetic. Because cocaine actually interferes with voltage-gated sodium channels, it basically produces a localized anesthetic effect. It's not like the kind of anesthetic that you'd use in general surgery. It's more like the localized anesthetic that you get when you go to the dentist. So what you're looking at here is an early ad for cocaine tooth drops. This is an example of a drug having a widespread therapeutic effect or use before becoming a controlled substance when its more toxic effects were discovered. We're kind of seeing a really similar thing with CBD. There hasn't really been a lot of research about the effects of cannabidiol and the negative effects, but people are wanting to use it in everything. So cocaine is water soluble. That allows it to be absorbed into the mucous membranes of the nose when it's snorted. It's typically not smokable in its salt form. If you treat it with ether or things like baking soda, it can be burned and smoked, which is known as freebasing. So ether is flammable and largely gets replaced with baking soda because of that, and both of those additions will produce crack cocaine, or sometimes called rock, because it basically it creates a rock-like form. Generally, some people will say that the effects of crack are more intense than cocaine. It's also cheaper than cocaine, and it's part of the reason why it became popular in the 1980s and is still a popular street drug today. It's cheap to produce, it's cheaper to buy, and you get more doses per volume because it's concentrated. Now, smoking the crack form actually does have a greater addictive potential and greater toxicity because of its rapid onset and because of its longer lasting effects. So let's talk about tolerance and overdose. As with other addictive drugs, a repeated use of stimulants will result in a reduced number of postsynaptic receptors. They're going to downregulate. In particular, dopaminergic receptors especially seem to be affected. For this reason, once those receptors reduce their numbers, you're going to need to take more and more of those stimulants to get high. These changes are pretty long-lasting, and it's part of the reason why a lot of people have difficulty breaking their addiction. Overdoses can result from long doses or, for example, a cocaine binge, which results in excessive hypertension, possible heart attacks, strokes, aneurysms, and there's not a treatment for overdose. Withdrawal is different. Physical withdrawal is not dangerous the way that opiate withdrawal is. Remember that one potentially lethal side effect of opioid withdrawal is tachycardia and possibly even a heart attack. Remember that the withdrawal symptoms are typically going to be opposite of the effects of the drug. So with stimulant withdrawal, you will get things like hunger, sleep disorders, a runny nose, lethargy, craving, depression, and anxiety. The craving, the depression, the agitation, and the anxiety is pretty intense for stimulants because of their direct actions on the reward pathway. And then finally, particularly for people that are abusing cocaine, there can be a permanent loss for dopaminergic neurons. There may also be a permanent loss of reuptake transporters for the monoamines, and even after that drug use stops. For the psychological effects, antidepressants may be one of the best things that we can use. So that is all I have. Take the time to kind of work through this and listen to this, and I will see you soon.